Hi, and welcome to the first Invest in Us webinar. This is Chris Perry, Executive Director of the First 5 Years Fund, and our topic for today is school community partnerships to build early learning communities. Our first three speakers are about to join us. Number one, Roberto Rodriguez, Deputy Assistant to the President for Education at the White House, Dr. Libby Doggett, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Early Learning for the U.S. Department of Education, and Linda K. Smith, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Early Childhood Development for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I'll turn it over to you, Roberto, now for your welcome and remarks.
Thanks so much, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from the White House. We're so thrilled that so many of you have joined us from all over the country for today's webinar. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us today. I want to begin by thanking Chris Perry and Sarah Rittling from the Invest in Us team and from the First 5 Years Fund. I want to thank Sam Anger-Twarji from the TheOunce of Prevention Fund, Nicole Vitale from the City of Cleveland, Jason Sachs from the City of Boston. Thanks to each of you for your leadership in early education. For helping us really kick off this webinar series. Nearly 6 months ago, our president convened state and local policymakers, mayors, school superintendents, corporate and community leaders, and advocates from around the country here at the White House for the first ever summit on early education. We had commitments from public and private and philanthropic organizations, together with federal awards from the Department of Health and Human Services and our Department of Education, which amounted to a collective investment of over $1 billion for America's youngest learners. It was a big day for early education, and since that time, support for early learning has only grown. Since the summit, the President has also called for a broader middle-class economic agenda that provides working families with the support that they need to make ends meet. Empowering every American with the education and training that they need to earn higher wages is a critical piece of that working family's agenda. But so is expanding high-quality early learning from birth through school entry, which has the dual purpose and objectives of promoting a child's early learning and development and helping support parents who are struggling to balance work and their family obligations. The President knows and acknowledges repeatedly that learning begins at birth. This is why he's called for progress on his plan to provide a continuum of high-quality early education for children from their earliest years all the way through school entry, including support for children and their parents through evidence-based home visits, guaranteed access to high-quality care for our infants and toddlers, and a plan to support high-quality preschool for all low and moderate income families with 4-year-olds across our country. Last week, we also celebrated here at the White House the 50th anniversary of Head Start that has served over 32 million children and families over the course of its time. In the same week, we saw Congress, our leaders in the House and in the Senate, introduce the Strong Start for America's Children's Act, a 10-year federal-state partnership to expand and improve early learning opportunities for children from birth through age 5. So momentum is continuing to build across this agenda, and we invite your participation and your continued support. As you know, we were really pleased and proud to have with us at the Early Ed Summit Invest in Us, which is an independent initiative organized by the First 5 Years Fund, and that's helping to gather and share resources to highlight great work in communities across the country and the support that's underway for our early learners and their families. For more concrete steps on how you can get involved in this agenda, I will refer you to www.investinus.org. And in the coming months, Invest in Us will continue to highlight the importance of early childhood education with our partners through days of action, through media events, public awareness efforts, and more. We'd love for all of you on this call to get involved. Let me be clear, the work of investing in our youngest children is something we cannot do without each and every one of you. Here at the federal level, we're proud to be partners with you in this work. We thank you for all that you do each and every day so well. And with that, I'm really pleased to have two outstanding leaders in our administration with us on the call today, our Deputy Assistant Secretaries at the Department of Education and at Health and Human Services, Libby Doggett and Linda Smith. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Libby Doggett for some brief remarks. Libby?
Thank you, Roberto, and thanks to all of you all for joining us here today. You've been doing this work long before the President got elected. You've been helping us all along the way, and I know you'll be there long after this President is gone. But I know each of you can see the difference a wonderful President makes who really cares and gets it about early learning. So on behalf of everybody on the call, Roberto, will you please relay to the President our thanks for all that has happened over the last few years and all that we have left to do, because it really has made a difference. I agree with Roberto that it wouldn't happen without all the people on the call. So thank you all, and all the funders and the Invest in Us community who has really made a difference. At the department, we're working hard to be good partners with HHS and with the White House and with all of you. We think it's really critical that all education agencies all over the country be at the table to talk and to lend our support and our dollars to early learning. At the Department of Education, we're pleased to have we co-manage the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge Fund with HHS. So Linda and I co-manage this. We're pleased that over $1 billion has gone out to 20 states, and thanks to all those states, because they're doing a terrific job. The first round of states is in their fourth year, and they'll probably get a continuation to wrap it all up. But the story that they have to tell in terms of what they're doing in terms of systems building and bringing education, Head Start, and child care programs closer together, to increasing the standards around early learning, to reaching out to families, to including health, to building frameworks for professional learning, are really, really making a difference. We're also pleased to co-manage the preschool development grants. That was quite exciting when 36 states applied for those. Unfortunately, we only had funding for 18 states. Those 18 states are in the process of developing their plans, which we are now reviewing. But most importantly is in September, 33,000 children will go to school for the first time. These will be 4-year-olds because of this funding. We need to make sure we keep this funding and we can expand on it, because we know what a difference it makes in the lives of those children and in those communities. And the last thing we're trying to do here at the department is really integrate early learning into all aspects. So it's no longer a K-12 system, but a P-12 or even a P-14 system. So we've made early learning a part of our I-3 grants, a part of our Promised Neighborhoods, a part of our Enhanced Assessment grants, and part of our school turnaround, and also a part of ESEA. As Roberto mentioned, we're looking forward. We're excited that the Strong Start bill has been reintroduced. We know that that is the vision and the amount of money that it's going to take to have the transformative change that this country needs in early learning. We hope that the Congress will listen and really take note of it. We're also very eager to assure that ESEA becomes a pre-K through 14 or a P to 14 law, instead of just looking at K-12. We're working hard on that, and we're working hard to get the budget where it needs to be in terms of the preschool development grants and other aspects of education or early learning, and of course working with HHS on that. Finally, I want to say that Arnie Duncan has just been an incredible advocate. We will continue to have him out front and center, because I think he has made a difference. He's also joined by our deputy now, John King. I hope you all are getting to know him. He's another wonderful advocate. So we will be working closely with them, with HHS, and with you all to really make a difference for children, because there's much work that needs to be done. So now I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Linda Smith.
Well, thank you, Libby, and thanks to Roberto and to all the folks at Invest in Us for sponsoring this series of webinars. This is going to be great, and we're very much looking forward ourselves to hearing about all that's going on in Cleveland and Boston. But before we get to that, I just want to stress from the HHS perspective, I think one of the things that we think is vital in a community school partnership is the quality of it, and to make sure that we are heading in the right direction and ensuring that all early learning that is expanded in schools, school districts, and community-based settings is high quality, and I can't say that enough. We did, as Libby just went through some of the things the Department of Education is working on, we just did a series of orientations for our 275 new early Head Start child care partnership grantees that just went, they were just amazing, and I have to say credit the states for all of the work that the states are doing to break down the barriers between child care and Head Start right now. It just, the solutions, everyone is out there looking for solutions, and I can't tell you how proud we were to hear all that's going on around the country. Well, I have the telephone in my hand. I just want to stress the importance of what we think constitutes high quality here at HHS, and that is that we are providing comprehensive services to our children, and that goes beyond curriculums taught in the classroom. It includes things like health and nutrition, developmental and behavior screenings that are done frequently and at the right times for children, and that we identify kids that need extra support as soon as we can, that we consider children's social emotional development and their mental health, and how we are providing the right foundation for children when they begin their learning experiences. And then finally, I think we think here that one of the most important partnerships is with the families of the children that we're serving, that they are the advocate and the first teacher for their children, and that by ensuring that we are working with them, we are providing the best possible foundation for our children. And most of these types of services, whether it's nutritious food or social emotional development, are provided through partnerships within the community. And that's really important to us, and something that we're seeing in our Early Head Start Child Care partnerships. That's quite amazing that all of the partners are coming to the table. So if a child's hungry, they get the food they need. If they are stressed out or scared or frightened because of something that's going on, that they or their family are getting the social emotional support and the counseling that they need. So we think these things are integral to the development of children, and they also help children as they begin to transition into our public school system. So again, these community partnerships are critical to us, and we're looking forward to hearing what Boston and Cleveland have learned about this as they've done their work out there in the community. So I just want to thank again Chris and the folks at Invest in Us, because I think this is an amazing series, and we're very much looking forward to hearing from the speakers today and those in the future. So Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Is Chris there?
Yes, we are. Thanks,
okay.
Linda, Libby, and Roberto for those remarks. I really appreciate everything you're doing to lead all of us in our work on early childhood education and increasing investments. And with that, let's turn now to the main event with our colleague Sam from TheOunce, who's going to do an overview and then introduce our speakers from Cleveland and Boston. Sam?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Samantha Agner-Truergy from TheOunce of Prevention, and thank you to all of the folks at the federal level who could really stress the importance of not only today's information, but the ongoing work that everyone listening and on the webinar is engaged with at every day. I think it goes without saying to this audience that early learning is really a vital strategy to ensure that children are not only well prepared to enter kindergarten, but are actually prepared to be successful throughout school. And research, as everyone just stressed, research is showing that it's not just access to any early childhood experiences, but high quality care that really transform children's trajectory, and not only helps children and families, but actually can help school districts achieving both kindergarten readiness and actually the longer term achievement goals that school districts have, things like third grade reading scores, high school graduation rates, reduced teen pregnancy, things that are very costly to intervene on later on. And school districts really do have a unique role in early learning. And depending on the landscape and the broader services that are available to children and families in their community, they may take multiple roles, both a provider of early learning services, either with preschool in their own building or contracting out birth to 3 services or preschool services in partnership with community-based organizations, but also as a community member, having a vested interest, regardless of their role as funder, in ensuring that early learning programs are really as high quality as possible to be able to help them achieve their ongoing goals. Next slide, please. I wanted to start by telling you just a little bit about the Ounce. We've been around for about 30 years, and we've persistently pursued a single goal, that all American children, particularly those born into poverty, have access to high-quality early childhood experiences beginning at birth or before birth, those that are so crucial to the first 5 years of life. We know that the achievement gap is evident as early as 18 months, and that children born into poverty begin life with odds stacked against them. And that's not just unfortunate for them and their families, it's a problem for all of us. As we just described, it's a problem that we are all creating intervening solutions later on in their life. But it's one that can and must be solved. And by starting early and aligning our programs for young children to the programs we know, to what we know works and can change their outcomes over the long term, we can actually prepare children for success in school and in life and make that an integral part of our nation's education system. The Ounce is developing and demonstrating proven solutions every day by putting early learning theory into practice through our expertise in programs, research, professional development, and policy and advocacy. We work at the state and local levels to help communities integrate early learning into their educational continuum and prioritize those areas of early learning that are most at need in their own community. Today, I'd like to welcome 2 examples of school district leaders really working hard to do just that. Well, today we'll hear from Nicole Vitale, the Director of the Office of Early Childhood Education at Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and Jason Sachs, the Director of Early Childhood Education in the Boston Public Schools. These 2 leaders have worked tirelessly to help not only the children they are serving directly, but to work with the larger community to ensure that all children are gaining increased access to high-quality early learning programs. Nicole, I'd like to turn it on to you to talk a little bit more about what's happening in your community.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Good afternoon. We are from Cleveland, Ohio, the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and we've done some major expansion in early childhood with the help of community partners and other agencies. So we'll take a few minutes to talk about a little bit about our background and where we've gone with that. So next slide, please. Okay, so this slide just gives us a picture of what our district is. It's a large urban public school district with about 39,000 students. 23% are special needs. 100% of our students get free and reduced lunch. So we have a high need for early intervention in Cleveland, and we've partnered with Head Start and federal agencies for years now, but we've really worked on the expansion over the last 3 or 4 years. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this graph shows us the number of high-quality seats from this school year, 2014-2015, and then our increase next school year. So this past school year, we had 1,772 high-quality seats for our pre-K program, and next year we've expanded to have 1,882 sites. We're adding new classrooms. In a lot of our special ed classrooms, we're adding typical peers, so those are integrated classrooms, and we are closing 2 schools, but we're reopening those classrooms in another site. So we are looking at a pretty big expansion for next year. Okay, next slide, please. So the Cleveland Plan is a law that we have in Cleveland, and a piece of that emphasizes the commitment to expand pre-K throughout CMSD. The goal of the Cleveland Plan is to transform our schools and make education better for all children. So the focus on this piece is on the early learning intervention. So our Office of Early Childhood has moved over from a pre-K office to a pre-K to 3 office. So we're working with teachers and professional development as well to provide early intervention services so that all of our kids are on track for reading in grade 3. Ohio has Ohio's 3rd grade reading guarantee, so a big part of our work focuses around that initiative. And the goal is for all kids to be ready for school in kindergarten, but also readers by grade 3. So special education and regular education departments are merging to create a wider continuum of services for all children. We provide professional development for all of the teachers. We don't just focus on special ed or just regular ed. So we're bringing things together and changing the mindset and the culture around how to service children. The strong focus is on early intervention and prevention. And through our pre-K initiative, we're able to build high-quality seats so that all kids are entering kindergarten ready to learn. Next slide, please. So Pre-for-CLE is it's a collaborative roadmap that's been created by agencies that have partnered with the district. So it's made up of community members, politicians, philanthropists, and the goal is to increase the number of students who enter kindergarten ready to succeed. And a strategy is to enter the number of high-quality early childhood seats from 3 or 4-year-olds in the city. The quality is defined by our state rating system. So Ohio uses the Step Up to Quality rating system, and the requirement is a minimum rating of 3 stars. It's a 5-star rating system. All of our sites that we've had rated this year have been rated a 5, so we're on a good track with that. But the idea is to have high-quality seats. So we're leveraging comprehensive services through community engagement, and the partners in that work are very integral, and they provide funding and resources and professional development. So it is a real collaborative effort. It's not just the school district working towards this. So next slide, please. Okay, so Pre-for-CLE, it's the plan to accelerate the access to the high-quality preschool for all of Cleveland's 3 and 4-year-olds. Right now we're focusing on 4-year-olds. Eventually we're going to move down to 3-year-olds. And it's inclusive of all of Cleveland's early learning programs. We use universal pre-K funding from Cuyahoga County, Head Start, Child Care, and CMSD Preschool. It's focused on supporting early learning in Cleveland through a variety of ways, providing support to rapidly increase the number of high-quality options throughout the city, not just school district options, but options out in the community also. Raising funds to provide tuition, transportation, and other assistance to help families access the high-quality preschool. We're trying to eliminate the barriers. Some families have a hard time getting the kids to school, so we're looking at creative ways of using funding to eliminate those barriers. Providing a citywide communications and recruitment strategy to give parents the information and tools that they need to choose a high-quality preschool. And some of that is educating the community on what to look for to identify highest quality seats. Bringing partners together to increase the collaboration. And like I said, it's a citywide effort, so that's been a large focus of our work this year too. Okay, next slide, please. So community partnerships are an important piece of it, and through those community partnerships we have joint recruitment of families and students, joint professional development efforts for all of our teachers, combined focus on the Step Up to Quality rating system and meeting those high standards in every classroom, sharing resources between the district and the community agencies, so not just allocating resources to CMSD, but allocating resources to the community agencies as well. So through the work, we've identified a few opportunities for growth in the areas of teacher salary, and there are minor differences in the standards of quality through Head Start and Step Up to Quality. So those are 2 areas that we're working through the kinks, and we're trying to come up with ways to make those a little bit easier on both ends, the community agencies and the school district. So Next slide, please. Okay, so early learning alignment. Within our department, we've aligned pre-K to grade 3, which is a big step for us because we were always focused on pre-K. And we've also brought special ed and regular ed together. And then we're trying to get teachers to focus on the early learning standards for all students, not just the regular ed students. So this is an area of growth for us, but we've come a long way, and our teaching staff has really come a long way with this. So there's a focus on the 3rd grade guarantee, like I mentioned before, early intervention, so that our students become literate and strong readers by grade 3. Then we also have an alignment of comprehensive services like nurses, psychological services. Project ACT is for our homeless students. We have a family and community engagement office that has excellent resources and parent universities for our parents. We also have social services and counseling. So these are great resources that we have available for our families, and we work with the community agencies so that our families in Cleveland can access the resources. Next slide, please. So leveraging support, our support comes from a variety of providers: Head Start, Universal Pre-K, which is through Cuyahoga County, the Ohio Department of Education, Title I funding. Starting Point is a huge partner in our work, and they provide resources as well as professional development. And we use our state support team, which is our Educational Service Center of Cuyahoga County. And then we also have private funding and foundation support through the Pre-for-CLE initiative. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide talks about our Pre-for-CLE progress to date. We have a compact, the Cleveland Early Childhood Compact that's formed, and there were Pre-for-CLE partners chosen to serve on that compact. And the Starting Point in the ESC is the administrative entity that directs Pre-for-CLE. We have a director, Katie Kelly, and she works with both the district and the community side. So through Pre-for-CLE, we've opened 335 new high-quality preschool spaces. 260 of those are in the district, CMSD. 75 are in the community-based child care setting, and they've used a combination of state and county funding. 396 slots moved from high quality, or moved to high quality through the rating system, so they weren't necessarily rated high quality, but they were brought up to high quality. $9.5 million has been raised towards the Pre-for-CLE goals in years 1 through 3. We are currently on target to move 25 to 50 new sites to high quality in the first 2 years, and we have a partnership with Case Western Reserve who evaluates our program, and they're constantly providing data to the team. So, okay, and then there's our contact information, my email address, the office number, and the website if anybody has questions about our program. Thank you. I think am I giving this back to Sam?
Yes, thank you so much, Nicole. And for everyone on the webinar, it will be recorded, and you'll be have access to the contact information afterwards as well. Now, if we can move on to the next slide, I'd love to introduce Jason Sachs from Boston Public Schools. Jason?
Hello, everybody. All right. So we have a website, so everything that I talk about and you want to go deeper in, you can just go to the BPS Early Childhood Readly.com, or on Google, you can just type BPS Early Childhood and you'll get references to everything. Okay, next slide. So I am here to talk briefly about the Boston programs, and then we'll lead into some of the challenges that both community-based programs and the Boston Public Schools face. But first, let me set some context. In about 2005, Mayor Menino, who had been a mayor for a long time, basically decided with the then superintendent, who had been a superintendent for about 9 years, that they were going to create preschool programs for 4-year-olds. And they decided that they wanted to do it in the public schools because they, at that point, felt that community-based programs couldn't afford to do it right, and that they just literally didn't have the financial capacity to do it. And so it was basically a strong mayor and a strong superintendent who basically before 2005 had taken their funding to fund full-day kindergarten and had felt bad because in order to do the programs for 5-year-olds, they had to cut their funding for programs for 4-year-olds, save for early intervention. So the Boston Public Schools context is that 70% of our kids are on free and reduced lunch, 45% are English language learners. Our numbers are actually pretty similar to Cleveland as far as demographics. Our preschool classrooms, which we call K1, are 22 students to a teacher and a paraprofessional. Our teachers start with a bachelor's degree, but within 5 years have to have a master's degree. The salary is the same as the K-12 teachers. In fact, that's one of the reasons they call our teachers K1 teachers, is so that they're on the same union scale as every other teacher in the Boston Public Schools. And between 2005 and 2009, we spent a ton of time really thinking about what does quality mean. And so for us, that really was around curriculum, professional development, and coaching. And also NAYC accreditation. So between 2005 and 2009, we spent a lot of time really thinking about what does early childhood strong curriculum and professional development look like, and then we took those to scale across the district as we grew our classrooms, and we went from about 30 classrooms to about 150 classrooms in the Boston Public Schools between 2005 and 2010. And then in 2010, basically we started thinking about scaling up our structures and really deepening our professional development, and really, frankly, looking at kindergarten and special education in the public schools for early childhood, and using NAYC accreditation as a base. We had set the goal to have all our programs accredited. And then what we also found, because we do a lot of evaluation, we do evaluations every 2 years, that on the class scale and some other instructional quality scales, that pushing teachers to think on conceptual development for young children was really hard. So we spent a fair amount of time thinking about, so how maybe we could do Reggio documentation. That's seen in this Making Learning Visible, this MLV. We also do storytelling, story acting. So we really thinking of ways to improve teacher practice for conceptual development. So that's sort of our big sort of quality push. And then we basically have spent the last couple years, which I'll talk more about later, really thinking about kindergarten curriculum, professional development, first and second grade professional development, and what's needed there. And then we decided that, all right, so we've been doing this in the public schools, but what about community-based programs? Is there a way that we don't put them all out of business? Because when the public schools opened up their programs for 4-year-olds, this really became a threat financially to preschool programs that were serving, in the community-based programs that were serving 3 and 4-year-olds or birth to 3-year-olds. So by taking the 4-year-olds in the public schools and offering free services, it was really a challenge for our community-based partners. I don't know how many went out of business, but it was certainly financially more difficult for them. And so we decided to create a pilot of our quality model, which was a curriculum, coaching, and professional development. And the curriculum is a combined of Opening the World to Learning, which is a curriculum, a 2005 curriculum that David Dickinson and Judy Schickendance created, based on a lot of vocabulary. And then we took out their math and we put in the Building Blocks math curriculum, which was written by Doug Clements and Julie Sarama, and it's a really strong math curriculum. And the other thing I want to say about curriculum is that, you know, I think we in early childhood were more about following the students' interests and then trying to make it developmentally appropriate and match sort of thinking about a scope and sequence. These two curriculum come with a scope and sequence, so they think about where are children in September and where should they end up at the end of the year. And while you have individual differentiation and room for child generative projects, there really is a lot of care thought to scope and sequence, and I don't think we spend as much time in the field thinking about that. So we did all of that, and in actually 2012, there was several evaluations done of our program and looking at student outcomes, and not in the community base. That's where we are now. We're actually evaluating that. But right now in the preschool program in the Boston Public Schools, there was an evaluation, and it found to have really strong effect sizes from 0.3 to 0.6 in math and vocabulary, and so it's become, a lot of people are looking at it saying, what do you do to get such strong outcomes? And this is compared to kids who are in community-based programs and Head Starts. And so I think this whole focus on scope and sequence curriculum and coaching has sort of played into this, plus NAYC accreditation has played into that. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. So give me the next slide, please. Okay, so we did all of this work in 2012, I mean up to about 2012, and we really have spent more of our time in the last maybe 4 years actually focusing on NAYC accreditation to improve kindergarten programs and really thinking more around focus on K2, which is our kindergarten curriculum. So we left preschool sort of untouched, but I want to walk you through into last year's data on the Dibbles, which was looking at beginning of the year kindergarten scores on the Dibbles. Now the Dibbles is not a score that early childhood people get very excited about because it's basically skills you need for reading, but it doesn't measure vocabulary, it doesn't measure comprehension. But it is something that schools are very focused on because these are the skills you need for reading. So basically, if you meet benchmark, you have an 80% chance of being able to have the skills you need to read by 3rd grade. If you are well below benchmark, you have an 80% chance of not being able to read. So it's necessary for comprehensions, it's necessary but not sufficient for learning, but you need these skills. So now what we're looking at is kids who went through the BPS K1 last year versus kids who did not. And again, I just want to emphasize that the majority of the kids that do not go through the BPS K1 are in community-based programs or Head Start. Probably the majority are in Head Start. And then if you look at the benchmarks, you know, those if you look at those that go through K1 and those that don't, you can see, for example, African Americans, 79.7% meet the benchmark if they went to K1 versus 56%. And if you look at Hispanic, which is really startling, it's 68.6 versus 34.8. So there's 2 points that I want to make here. One, we shouldn't be afraid of the literacy measures because strong early childhood education plays into reading skills, even though we didn't necessarily do any nonsense vocabulary or pull students out to focus on phonemic awareness. But what we did was strong early childhood vocabulary thematic integrated curriculum, and you get these startlingly strong scores. Second point I want to make is about English language learners. If you take Hispanic as a proxy, which is obviously not a great proxy, but it is a close proxy to English language learners, you can see that when you do a strong, developmentally appropriate, thematic, integrated curriculum, look at the differences you're getting in kids in their reading skills. And so again, I think this is a good thumbs up for early childhood education as far as if it's done well with well-trained teachers and a scope and sequence, you can get pretty phenomenal results. We have other results in more typical early childhood measures in vocabulary and in applied math problems, and then all the way up to 3rd grade that show that the differences between the kids who go through the K1 and those that don't are pretty lasting and substantial. There is some fade out, and so we can talk about that. Okay, so the next slide, please. Okay, so now I want to talk about our interactions with what we decided to do was try and run a program called Boston Kids, in which we took 10 programs, 14 classrooms, and we took our curriculum, salary enhancements, and our coaching, and we worked with directors on a monthly basis to help them as well think about sort of how do you implement a curriculum and support your teachers going through it. And so I just want to sort of walk through challenges and solutions that we've come up with thus far. And I should say that this is now a mixture of, first we have the Boston Kids funding, but now we have a Preschool Expansion grant. So some of the discussions that we've had around the Preschool Expansion grant also inform this conversation. Okay, so one of the things we know is that degrees and salaries are very low compared to the public schools. I think this is really a huge challenge that we have to solve because who the teacher is and what they're teaching is critical. And even if you do a ton of professional development and coaching to support teachers, if you have 30 to 40% turnover of teachers and or directors, the infrastructure to support high quality is really a threat. So I don't think we can really move forward to improving practice until we resolve this issue. I think that the health and human service model, which has driven a lot of the child care design for a long time. Even though I think we're beyond this, still plays into it. I think that when you look at public school institutions, they have a union model. They're 22 to 2, the hours of the day, those were all negotiated by the union. They weren't thought of as the best practice, but they were certainly designed by human beings who were protecting their interests, which then created a climate for educational for thinking around education. For example, we have common planning time, which is a negotiated time where, an hour and a half a week, teachers actually take time to plan the curriculum with one another. There's professional development time, there's substitute costs. So all of that infrastructure for planning and thinking about student work is built in. The other issues in a public school, you have systems. We have a school committee that oversights all of our programs. In the community-based programs, there's this lack of systems, so it's a challenge. Head Start has a system, but independent community-based programs don't necessarily have that. Each individual program is really choosing their own curriculum, but what we're seeing is activity to activity, and this, for example, teaching strategies, goals, or others are driving sort of what you should do, but it doesn't really necessarily have a teacher with a whole pedagogical vision or a school district with a whole pedagogical vision that then drives change. And so I think it's more around compliance. On the positive side for community-based, what we've seen is that by picking a curriculum and doing coaching with a strong pedagogical vision, you can see some nice change. The salary enhancement certainly can slow down turnover. However, I would argue that what we put, about $5,000 per teacher, is not enough. That's why this Preschool Expansion grant is really going to give us an opportunity to pay teachers on par with Boston Public School teachers. So that will be roughly starting salary of $51,000 a year. I think having a mayor with a citywide vision will help, and or the state with the Preschool Expansion grade, having a vision of what strong early childhood pedagogy and salary should look like really will give us an opportunity. I am still unclear if the public schools can become a leader, if there's just not enough trust between community-based programs and public schools, because if public schools can put community-based programs out of business, or if we're the K-12 and we're always pushing down early childhood practice, we're pushing down first grade and second grade, will there ever be that deep transitional trust? And so it's great to hear Cleveland. If you've got it worked out, I'd love to hear more about that. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. For the public schools, I still think that we don't have a room for integrated curriculum. We have an English language arts department, we have a math department, we have a social studies, we have a science department, and all are sort of fighting for what's limited about a 3.5-hour instructional day. Usually it's just math and English language arts. It's usually English language arts in the early years. So really thinking through what an integrated system would look like is really important. The other thing is, because everybody's so focused on third grade scores, starting at third grade, there's not a large emphasis on sort of what the intervention could look like. For example, we have summer school, and it only started for kids who failed the MCAS, our third grade test. So we've actually created summer school programs for kids who are early childhood all the way up to second grade. Most of the measures we have are not observational data. They're usually a one and done kind of test. So I think, building into the system observational measures. And clearly we're not serving working parents well. We're still based on an agrarian day. And when you have young children, after school programs and full day needs are critical. So you can't just say, okay, we're doing a school day, figure it out, which is actually what we do in Boston. Okay, so on the positive side, we have strong data now that shows that a public school intervention can make a huge difference, and that coaching and strong department with resources. So we have a strong early childhood department, and that's made a huge difference. We have been able to develop a thematic and integrated kindergarten curriculum that now is definitely across the district, and people are really excited about it. So we have pushed up, not pushed down, and we are creating a first and second grade curriculum with No Negro So that we're designing that will be a literacy-based curriculum, but it will have strong emphasis on social studies and sciences, and it will be on knowledge building. And so it's percolating up into first and second, and we're pilot testing that in 30 classrooms next year, and we'll be running it across the district. I I think the data, I'm sort of wrapping up, I think that the data that we've collected has created, I've had 4 superintendents and 2 mayors, but the data seems to link them and everybody seems to get this. So I think it's really important that people collect data and keep focused on closing the achievement gap, which I think everybody cares tremendously about. Next slide. Next, okay. So my final thing to say is that this work is not easy. The changing structures and belief system is a slow process, but the student outcome data is really getting stakeholders to see the influence of the elements of the BPS program. So again, I think that if you're in a community-based program and you have the infrastructure to support salaries, and you use a curriculum, and you have coaching, and you have a pedagogical vision, and you're using observation and documentation, that you can do it in community-based programs, but you need the systems and supports to really make that happen. I think that, you know, for community-based programs, they've been underpaid for so long that they're running at a business on the fine line of the margin. And so it's very difficult for them to think about educational institution. It's usually about compliance, and it's usually for all sorts of for challenges that make it very hard for them to think about what is our pedagogical vision for kids and what is our 3rd grade trajectories. Whereas for schools, it's a little easier to think that way. School districts, we have to get out of the structures that work against teachers. Teachers don't have enough time to observe and think in an integrated curriculum, and we have to find ways that they can access families. So like, for example, this is our first year, we're going to be doing a kindergarten conference with all our pre-K and K teachers to think about home links and really partnering up with families. But it took us 10 years to get to a place where we know our curriculum well enough to translate it and think about exchanges. Everything I've talked about does not touch the birth to 3 system. 3-year-olds, I think that's a whole nother piece that we need to spend some time thinking about. Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Jason and Nicole. I want to take a step back. You heard 2 great examples of the way school districts are thinking about not only improving early childhood services, but collaborating with the community, the larger community, to be able to really strategize around the way early childhood services are measured, expanded, and defined in their own context. I wanted to take a minute and take a step back and look at a couple of themes across these 2 communities that were discussed today. These 2 examples obviously give us great insight into some of both of the vision and the struggles of implementing them, but there are a couple themes I wanted to point out. Starting with really the identifying their own community context in order to define strategies. We'll then talk a little bit about the need for consistent measuring and communicating about what quality actually is. We'll talk a little bit about some of the principles in partnering with community-based programming that you heard, aligning those services that are happening in the birth to 5 space, and particularly you heard preschool, with what's happening in the early grades. And then, of course, not only looking at community-based providers, but also the other resources that are available in your community to think about partnerships and increasing impact, both for service provision, whether it's wraparound services or health services, but also in terms of ongoing collaboration. Next slide, please. So starting with the community context to drive strategies, there's 3 things I wanted to point out, and you heard on-the-ground examples of it today. But thinking about where are the service gaps, the quality gaps, and your own achievement gap in your community, and to help target what kind of strategies actually will take you to the next level. The service gap, I think you're really looking at looking at a family level data. Are the services available in your community meeting the needs of families? Jason alluded to some of the struggles with working families, and really thinking about where are they accessing services? Where are the funding streams that are available either for the school district or for the community-based organizations? Where are those accessible or excluding certain populations? And looking at specific barriers both to the services provided, but to also who is eligible for those services. I think there are two ways to look at this. You can look at specific populations as these two school districts started to detangle. Specific populations who aren't able to get into specific services or funding streams, but also in terms of thinking about areas in your community. Another way to look at it is geographically and how you can identify specific areas that either don't have transportation access or maybe there aren't the right kind of quality services in that area. The second thing with the quality gap is really thinking about who already is meeting quality standards and what are you going to do to help them meet that. As we talked about, it's those high quality early childhood programs, and we'll talk a little bit in the next slide about how we're defining those that high quality. But what is it actually, either community-based organizations or in school districts' own programs that are really preventing programs from meeting these quality standards? It may just be funding, but it may be things like teacher turnover and training or professional development. And then also thinking about, is everyone on the same page with what that quality gap is and why parents are choosing or not choosing the programs that are really driving long-term outcomes for children. Cleveland actually talked a little bit about this in terms of helping move slots where children already were up the quality gap, which is another way to think about it as opposed to trying to really recreate or create more high quality seats, is to move those seats up the quality ladder. I think one of the most important contexts for all of this is the achievement gap, is to really think about not just we know at a universal national level, but in your own community, who's not meeting kindergarten readiness or third grade reading standards, and how are you defining that and then using that to identify the service gap and the quality gap. Breaking down your community by either geographic or population service areas that you can then use to help expand and define quality and set your priorities. Next slide, please. So what is quality? We really think of quality in terms of a multifaceted definition. Thinking about structural quality, things like ratios and group size you heard a little bit about, and then ranging to instructional quality that includes teachers who are well trained and well supported, the instructional tools and the professional development on those tools that are high quality and evidence-based. Thinking about family and community engagement, both in how families, as Linda mentioned earlier, are really empowered as their children's first and most important teacher, but also how you're leveraging the overall community resources to meet the wraparound needs of families, not just what they're getting in the classroom. As well as the instructional leadership is really under having those leaders who are over teachers be well bought into, understand high quality early childhood, what they are looking for in those programs as they support their teachers on an everyday basis. Some tips for defining the quality that you heard throughout the conversation today is thinking about leveraging existing state and national systems. Most states now do have a QRIS that is either underway in development or in implementation. That's a quality rating and improvement scale which helps define high quality on a ladder that can support program quality improvement. Thinking about evidence-based metrics, things like class size and ratio, implementation of a research-based curriculum, the measurements, as was talked about earlier, of classroom environment, and the interactions that are really the teachers and children are having that are the definition of that high-quality classroom. Ensuring that all components of quality are really accounted for in your system and that you're not honing in on one singular element and leaving the rest out, since we know it does need to we do need a comprehensive approach. And then to make sure that everyone's on the same page about this. I think this is partially a carrot and a stick dynamic, and that there are both requirements of minimum quality, but also an incentive to move up the quality the quality scale, and using this common definition to really incentivize quality through policy and funding strategies. Making sure that providers, professionals, and parents, as well as pediatricians and other wraparound services are really all engaged in that conversation, and so that there's a community level understanding of what high quality is, and how the community can all support through policy high quality instruction. Next slide, please. Thirdly, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the principles you heard in Boston and Cleveland's conversation today about partnering with community-based programs. Obviously, at the heart of this is the relationship and the trust, as Jason pointed out, between community-based organizations and the school district leadership. And as all good relationships are, it really is based on mutual respect and trust of each other, knowing that as a school district, while you may be able to provide additional services, the point that was brought out today in both of these district examples is it takes a comprehensive approach to really support all children. 4 components that I think are 4 strategies around some of this, which again you heard a few examples from today, are thinking about supporting that continuous quality improvement, helping programs move up in the quality scale, whether that is a quality rating scale or elements of quality that the school district is prioritizing. That it's really about that conversation and how and what it is that programs need to all be engaged in this continuous quality improvement process. Secondly, thinking about how can you target funds to programs that are serving the target populations. So if you are, as a school district, looking to really engage in closing your achievement gap, identifying where those children at the bottom of your achievement gap are being served, and how can you really help those programs both be high quality, strive for a continuous and quality improvement process, and then making sure that they are serving those children, whether in your own school or in community-based providers where they are being served already, in really targeting those populations. Finally, we brought, as I just mentioned, the common messaging about early learning and families and communities. Understanding what is kindergarten readiness, what is quality, and how can everyone be on the same page when you're talking to families and the community about those priorities. Multiple competing messages can be distracting in terms of thinking about getting the highest need children into the highest quality programs, and really reducing that achievement gap and utilizing most effectively early intervention strategies. Finally, thinking about coordinated systems to support all programs. Jason talked about the professional development strategies in Boston and how they're engaging with the community-based programs. And Nicole talked a little bit about the recruitment strategies that they're using. Those are 2 examples of thinking about a system that is designed to bring all programs into the fold and into the conversation. Starting with sitting down to talk about what are the struggles that community-based and school-based programs are having, where can school districts and community-based programs be an asset to each other, and where are both districts' priorities and strengths can help identify which one of these partnership strategies can really take precedence in your individual community. Next slide, please. The other thing that both Nicole and Jason talked about is the necessity of having aligned early childhood and early grade programs. Nicole talked about it in terms of the school district really having a comprehensive department over both of the early childhood and the early grades. And Jason talked about it a little bit in terms of the curriculum strategies that they're using. I think there are three elements of the alignment process that really were highlighted in their conversation. One is the horizontal consistency across the early learning grades that really is a fundamental component of aligning vertically as well. They both talked about some of that both within their own school programs, but also with community-based organizations. The second is that not only the horizontal consistency across the early learning, but then thinking about what the tools you're offering across the early age spectrum look like. That includes curriculum, developmentally appropriate assessments, as Jason talked about, but then things like data sharing across grades, transition meetings, enrollment strategies that allow for consistency in who's actually in a school from year to year. And finally, the central office structures that support alignment. Things like how professional development funds are allocated to schools and community-based organizations, how the leverage that the principals have over teachers across that grade spectrum, the incentives that principals are given to engage with their community-based organizations to have alignment not only with programs within their own buildings, but programs outside their own walls as well. The other thing that often it can be a stumbling block is the aligned wraparound services. If a central office is thinking about classes for children in older elementary, how can you really think about wraparound services with parents, with health providers, with mental health providers, referral systems that span those early grade spectrum, not just siloed into a K-12 or an early childhood realm. Next slide. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about how both of these school districts talked about leveraging partners outside the community-based providers to increase the impact. Starting with clearly communicated goals for children. We heard in the pre for CLE and strategy, as well as in the mayor's objectives in Boston, that there was really a definition of a data-driven approach to expanding early childhood and defining quality for who and how they were going to do that. Those clearly communicated goals can really be leveraged not only to ensure that all early childhood providers are on the same page, but really that there is an opportunity across all of the stakeholders, including foundations, including wraparound services, as I've mentioned, pediatrician health services, that everyone understands what the goals in those early years are. Then thinking about how to engage those organizations, and that it's not for one entity to take all of the services on themselves, that really thinking about how you get everyone involved and playing their part with a common goal can really be essential to making sure that children and families receive all the services they need. By having the clearly defined goals and also for engaging organizations can really help to make sure that everyone's on the same page and can identify their own role and reorient their own strategies to achieving the common community goals. And then finally, creating ongoing feedback loops for those community stakeholders. This can look like, as Nicole pointed out in the pre for CLE, this can look like a lead organization taking the helm on that. It can look like a local table for collaboration, but that it has clear objectives that everyone is working towards, and there is a space to improve on the strategies as time goes on and as people have some more experience with working with each other. So wrapping up those principles for school community partnerships, I'd like to open it up for questions. If you can move to the next slide. I believe that if anyone has questions, that you can type them into the box on the lower left-hand side or right-hand side of your screen, and we'll have our moderator read those questions out as they come in. Charlie, are there questions already, or should we start with?
So we have quite a few questions, and I think the first one that pops up here is the early childhood field has always been development focused, where K-12 has not. How are we going to ensure that early childhood remains developmentally appropriate when K-12 is often not during the early years?
Jason or Nicole, would you like to start with that?
So if you look on our website at our Focus on K2 curriculum, we have defined and created a developmentally appropriate kindergarten curriculum. And what the argument we're making is if you do this right, you get these nice Dibbles scores and you get these nice things that you worry about. And it is true. I think that the public schools really don't know how to educate young children well, and I would say that's probably going to play out for first and second grade. I think what's interesting about first and second grade is there are much more reading and math skills that you need. So trying to figure out sort of how those two worlds come together where you really are still building a community and going deeper with thinking and providing enough space and time for kids to kind of really dive into their work and do some thinking in small groups, and for teachers to facilitate those small groups is professional development and coaching. And so I think we're seeing that interface. I think the kindergarten curriculum in the Boston Public Schools Focus on K2 is our first shot at this, but stay tuned for first and second.
Nicole, did you have something to add?
Everything that he said is right on. The only thing I wanted to add is that for us, it's a growth area because we have a mixture out there, and so our curriculum does align, but we're working with the teachers on how to set up the classroom and facilitate instruction the right way so that it is a more developmentally appropriate environment.
That's great. I think that everything they said is absolutely correct. I also think that by having a table where there's multiple stakeholders, they're informing not only what the goals look like, but also in terms of ensuring that we aren't just pushing one viewpoint, is how we're going to ensure that there's actually collaboration across the best practices that we know from early learning, but also translating those achievement scores we know we can get, but that school districts have to be primarily focused on. And so I think through being open to rigorous assessment and in for the early learning field, being open to rigorous assessment and compromising and meeting halfway so that we are getting the overall alignment across those early grades through that curriculum is an essential strategy as well.
So we have another question. This is asking both local speakers to talk more about the work required to build the partnerships, specifically the mechanics, existing opportunities, and leadership needed, and working within two different cultures.
Nicole, do you want to start with that one?
Can you repeat it? I had a hard time hearing the question.
Yes, so just the question is asking about the work required to build the partnerships, the mechanics, existing opportunities, and leadership needed.
Okay, so we're a large urban district, so we have a great deal of community resources, and the nice thing about Cleveland is most of the community is easily accessible to us, so we already have like a higher ed compact of community members that work on the higher education end of the spectrum in the K-12, or pre-K-12. But so we pulled together some stakeholders to begin this work, and it wasn't a huge challenge because most people were on board and ready to participate and collaborate. Also because of the Cleveland plan, a lot of the stakeholders are involved in the work around getting our district on the track to making improvements. So we do have community agencies that work with us in the pre-K world already through Head Start funding and those different funding sources also. So we leverage some of those resources.
I think on our end, I'll start with the work. The work is fun. So, like, for example, we meet monthly with directors, and what we've been doing is our coach, and actually, half my coaching staff that are in the public school came from community-based programs and worked in community-based programs. And so I think we already come with not a bias, but a belief that there is strong early practice and early education programs in both the community and in the public schools. With that said, everybody's got to change. And so one of the things that we've been doing is the directors will go into the new community-based preschool classroom, and they will actually observe their teachers doing a practice. The teachers will then come back out and speak with the directors about any questions they have, and we also talk about just their pedagogical moves and the choices they made. So we're really focused on instructional practice, and I think that is becoming a great place for cross-sector discussions about what strong early childhood practice. Conversely, we have done a fair amount of training with our principals around what strong early childhood practice should look like, including changing the evaluation rubrics, because early education is actually a content area, and so what a teacher should be doing in either a CBO but also in the public school classroom in kindergarten and preschool really takes some thinking. And so we've done a lot of work again with our community-based partners in both NAYC accreditation and the rubrics with the school district's principals. So there's two examples. We have wonderful partners in higher ed and private funding, but there's still a lot of work to do. But again, as long as we're staying focused on the curriculum and the outcomes of kids, I think we have a better chance of moving forward.
I think that what you heard across both of these was a strong leader with a vision for really the continuous improvement and expansion of early learning, regular communication. So it's not a one-off conversation that can solve everything, but really thinking about setting up a regular communication cycle where people feel like they can continuously bring problems and solutions to the table, and also it being cross-sector. And so being as inclusive as possible, although targeted if it's a specific initiative, but really thinking about the inclusivity of multiple stakeholders that really can provide perspectives on how we can serve all children.
So we have another question. In Cleveland and Boston, has the need for expanded high-quality early childhood services impacted higher education teacher preparation programs?
So I will start. You guys can definitely jump in. I think I will start with one. Steve Tozer spoke at a recent event that we had and really spoke about the need for school districts to be partners with higher education in defining what they needed from early childhood preparation, teaching preparation programs. So I wonder, as you talk, Jason and Nicole, about your experiences, if you had any of those experiences of helping define what it was that was a high-quality early childhood teaching preparation.
We're in Cleveland. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Nicole.
Okay, so in Cleveland, we're in the process of strengthening the partnerships with it's Cleveland State University, who is the big state college in the area, and we have some other like Tri-C and Notre Dame College of Ohio, John Carroll University. So we're in the beginning stages of making that partnership more collaborative. We've had a partnership with them, and we work with them on several other items that relate to this work, but through the strengthening of that partnership, we'll be able to have some more input in that, but also we'll have more teachers be able to work in our sites. Pre-service teachers come out and work in our sites as we're working to expand. So it's a natural connection, but we're in the process of making that better.
Jason?
So, sure. I think I'll just wait till I hear my name in the future. So I think if I could to design a program, it would be a 3-year program in which you learn developmental theory so that you sort of knew where the kid was at. Then you spent a year learning a specific curriculum so that you actually know how to implement a curriculum with a scope and sequence. And then I would do a 1-year residency. So we're talking about a 3-year program, probably something similar to like a JD, you know, a law degree instead of this 1 year. I think that, you know, the Boston Public Schools, which has resources, has created a program called the Boston Teacher Residency, where we actually find people with bachelor's degrees and we pay them to get a master's degree while they teach for a year, and then for 5 years they work for the school district to pay off their master's degrees. And we need to create programs like that. I think higher ed, you know, needs to know that there's a business model out there that's going to support them. I think that in the past there hasn't been enough early childhood jobs to warrant higher ed to get involved at the level we need them to be involved in. But I think with the growth of preschool and the proof of jobs that are well compensated, that, you know, no parent is going to freak out that their child actually wants to be a teacher in this field, then I think we have a chance to make this work.
Excellent. Charlie, other questions?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more. I mean, this was a question we got quite a few times. And we hear a lot about dual language early learning programs and working with students that come from multilingual families or families that don't speak English as a first language. And so can both of the panelists talk about programs in their communities dealing with multi-language or dual language learners?
Sure. Jason, you addressed this directly. Do you want to talk a little bit about your community first?
Sure. So again, the OWL and frankly building blocks are developmentally appropriate curricula that allow for enough space and time and multiple ways to access the information for students whose first language is not English to access the curriculum. Our focus on K2 also, again, it gives kids enough space and time. When you're moving through so much information and you have a teacher talking at kids and you don't give kids enough space and time to do the work, it's really hard for English language learners. Couple that with the whole schooling experience where, if you look at second language learners, they're more likely to use family childcare, they're less likely to use formalized schooling, so then they hit the public schools in kindergarten without any preparation. And so another example is we've created a preschool program that has 2 master level kindergarten teachers who teach preschool kids who've never had any early childhood experience for 5 weeks prior to the public schools starting. So I think, getting more culturally relevant, getting more teachers who can speak 2 languages, creating curriculum that are accessible in multiple ways, and creating time and space for kids to navigate and work on sustained projects, all will help student outcomes. And then, as you can see with our thematic integrated curriculum, the data are pretty clear that our kids are doing pretty well once they come out. But you have to put these necessary supports there, otherwise it's just going to get harder and harder.
And I do think this harkens back a little bit to the developmental approach versus academic approach, since really so much that's going on here is around language acquisition. And yes, it's dual language acquisition, but teachers who really understand how language acquisition relates to literacy and is not, as Jason said, not drilling on certain vocabulary words, but really thinking about the knowledgeable about how children acquire language and can support, whether it's single or dual or multilingual families, really support the language acquisition.
Can I just push a little bit? I don't think we should make a distinction between academic and developmentally appropriate. Strong developmentally appropriate practice is quite rigorous. We're actually asking kids to think, and we're giving them the time and space and democracy and citizenry to think. What happens is we drill and kill it out of them. So I think academics actually has to change the way it thinks about young children, and it will be more rigorous. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that. That is precisely the message. I would also like to add to what you said, Jason, is about family engagement. So having both what is happening in the classroom, but also families who can understand how to support dual language learning at home as well. Other questions, Charlie?
I think that's about all the time we have for today, and we welcome any other questions that didn't get answered. If you want to email us at info@ffyf.org, that's First 5 Years Fund. You can also email the address that came to you when you received the invitation to this event, the Invest in Us email address. Sam, if you want to close, that'd be great.
Yeah, Charlie, if you could just go to the last slide. Thank you all for coming and joining us today. I hope that you really took a lot away. We are absolutely more than happy to think about what is happening in your own context, translating some of what you learned from Jason and Nicole. Great resources they both provided their information as well, along with other communities around the country that maybe struggle with specific areas that you as well are thinking about. So please feel free to reach out. As Charlie said, they gave that address, their address as well, and happy to connect. Or feel free to reach out to us at TheOunce, and we would be more than happy to think about resources that might make sense in your specific context. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, and more information will be coming out about that shortly.